The buzz of the last stragglers clearing out of the ballroom mingled with the distant hum of city traffic, weaving a quiet symphony that filled the expansive, dimly lit hall where the final touches of a sprawling wedding reception waited to be dismantled. Arden's hands moved rhythmically, his fingers tracing the smooth edges of silver place settings, adjusting every fork and knife with a precision born from years of practice. The soft overhead lights reflected faintly off his tousled dark brown hair, making the rich hazel of his eyes shine with a tired but steady glow. The work felt endless, but there was a calmness beneath the exhaustion, a silent companion to the low thrum of the deserted room. Seth was nearby, his breath visible in the colder air of the large space, as the air conditioning tried futilely to quiet the echoes of laughter and music from earlier. His broad shoulders loomed low over a table, placing delicate floral arrangements with a care that contrasted his usual casual ease. The small scar above his right eyebrow caught the light, giving his face an edge of roughness against the soft blue of his eyes, which were set in concentration but occasionally flicked to Arden with a weight that made the air between them seem charged. Seth wasn't known for lingering past closing time, especially not around anyone, yet here he was, glancing up as Arden straightened a centerpiece and deciding on something he hadn't before. "Hey!" Seth's voice was low, casual, but with a hint of hesitation, the kind that betrays something unsaid. "Help me finish the last few tables?" Arden blinked, glancing at Seth with a flicker of surprise. The invitation wasn't the unusual part. Working late was common in catering, especially for the big events, but it was Seth who was asking. Seth, who was so famously straight that people joked he had a personal relationship with every woman in the company, who never let anyone think otherwise, not even in passing. Arden had spent years quietly admiring Seth's undeniably magnetic presence from a respectful distance, never quite understanding the layers beneath until now. "Sure," Arden replied, voice soft but sure. "I don't mind. It's just the two of us now." Seth nodded, a faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth, but there was something else there too, a tension Arden couldn't place. As they moved side by side through the scattered remnants of the celebration, the space seemed to shrink, the silence stretching between them, neither rushing to break it nor retreat. The smell of wax from the candles, the crisp electric scent from the cooling lights, and the faint trace of rose petals lingering in the air seemed to wrap them both in a cocoon, isolating the night from the noisy judgments of daylight. Arden caught Seth glancing at him once. The way his gaze lingered was hesitant, as if weighing the risk of being seen for just a second longer than the comfortable limit. He felt a tight thrum of something unexpected, like electricity buzzing beneath his skin. He knew this evening was going to shift something between them. It already had, but how, exactly, was still unfolding in slow motion. They finished setting the last table, plates aligned perfectly, glassware shining under the dimmed chandeliers, and yet neither moved to leave. Arden wiped his hands on his apron, looking around at the softly glowing fairy lights wrapped around the pillars, the scattered petals, the empty champagne flutes. The glow seemed tender, intimate, almost secretive in the quiet dark. Seth sank into a chair beside a stack of leftover napkins and pulled his jacket tighter around his broad shoulders. His posture was tense, but defeated in a way Arden hadn't ever seen. The silence stretched again, heavy, with everything unsaid, until finally Seth exhaled roughly, breaking the stillness. "I never tell anyone this," Seth began, voice barely above a whisper, eyes fixed on a shiny empty wineglass resting upside down. "Not here. Not at work. Not where it matters. Everyone assumes I'm, well, straight, obviously. I don't know if I blame them. I like women. I swear I do. But sometimes it's like I'm playing a role, you know. Like I have to be that guy, perfectly sure, perfectly certain, or people look at me sideways." Arden sat back on his heels, palms resting lightly on the cold wood of the table. His heart pounded in a way that surprised him. The Seth sitting beside him, the Seth who had never seemed anything but confident, sounded vulnerable and raw. His own feelings stirred in a quiet whirl, an unexpected empathy rising without warning. "You don't have to pretend with me," Arden said, voice steady but gentle. "No one should have to be someone they're not, because it's easier for everyone else." Seth's gaze flicked up, meeting Arden's hazel eyes with something tentative, fragile. It was as if his words had been bottled up beneath years of toughened exteriors, and finally herewith, Arden he could let just a drop spill out. "It's exhausting," Seth admitted, running a hand through his hair, the scar above his eyebrow softening under the motion. "Always glossing over things, sidestepping questions, dodging judgment. It gets lonely, even in a room full of people." Arden's breath caught. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the invisible space that stretched between their separate worlds, within the same room. Instead, he just whispered, "You're not alone." The quiet was no longer empty, it hummed with possibility. The sparkle of the fairy lights seemed to pulse softly, echoing the flutter in Arden's chest. Neither man moved for a long moment, absorbed by the fragile hope hanging in the air, suspended between honesty and uncertainty. From the corner of his eye, Arden saw Seth shift slightly closer, the broad shoulders retreating from the weight of pretense, if only for a little while. Here, amid the remnants of celebration and the silence of closing time, something unspoken was beginning to take shape, a fragile thread of trust, tentative but real. For the first time, Arden allowed himself to consider that maybe the night was not just about tables and decorations, but about the courage it took to face what neither of them had dared to say out loud before. And maybe, just maybe, it was about two people finding themselves in the quiet aftermath of a crowded day, caught in a moment that would change everything. The sun filtered softly through the high windows of the kitchen, casting long, tender beams across the stainless steel countertops. The hum of the dishwasher mingled with the distant clatter of plates and the occasional barked orders from the front of house. Arden could feel the charged quiet between them, lingering like a thin mist, clinging to every shared glance and half-spoken word. The night's fragile understanding hadn't quite settled into daylight yet. Instead, it was a taut thread stretched tight between them, fragile enough to snap with one careless breath. Arden worked carefully at the dessert station, the delicate art of plating individual portions of tiramisu and lemon tarts, demanding his attention, but not quite capturing his whole focus. He caught Seth's eye out of the corner of his vision, a flicker of something in those deep blue eyes that made his stomach turn a little. It wasn't the easy camaraderie they usually carried, not the comfortable banter of co-workers sharing the load. It was something heavier, a conflicted, almost hidden charge that made Arden's heart pinch in places he hadn't expected. Seth leaned over to arrange a tray of macarons, his broad shoulders tense beneath the white apron. The scar above his right eyebrow caught the light, a stark contrast to the smooth warmth of his skin around it, but his eyes were softer today, clouded in thought. Arden wondered what ghosts were roiling beneath that calm exterior, what fears or regrets he was wrestling with in the quiet shelter of the kitchen. He wanted to ask, wanted to tear down the barrier between them. But the words stuck like thorns, too sharp to risk yet. Instead, Arden let his fingers brush lightly over a fork, the cool metal grounding him. "You okay?" His voice was low, hopeful, but it barely stirred the space between them. Seth's hands froze. A flicker passed over his face, a fleeting vulnerability. Then he shook his head, slightly as if to clear away the weight. "Yeah. Just thinking." There was a long silence. the kind that buzzed with all the things neither of them had said. Seth's jaw tightened, and Arden knew the conflict was more than surface deep. The man who all week had danced around questions of feelings and labels was now a puzzle to him, one Arden wanted to solve, but didn't want to break in the process. They moved back to their tasks, side by side, but not quite touching. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and espresso from the desserts, but Arden could taste the tension like ash on his tongue. He stole another glance and found Seth doing the same, a flicker of recognition passing between them. Two men caught in a moment, neither fully understood, wrestling with secrets too raw for daylight. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of measured silence and clinking plates. Neither spoke the words that hovered just beyond reach, and yet, somehow, the unspoken connection grew, fragile, tentative, but undeniable. Arden felt it in the way Seth's gaze softened when it met his, a silent echo of the vulnerability that hadn't quite fled the night before. When the lunch rush hit, the kitchen exploded into organized chaos. Orders flew in rapid-fire sequences. A steady stream of dishes demanded plating, garnishing, sending out with brisk efficiency. But amid the fury of the midday storm, something shifted. Arden noticed Seth's posture relax fractionally, the stressed lines smoothing from his face as he caught a break in the flood. "Hey," Seth said, voice low but steady over the clang of pans and shouted requests. He caught Arden's eye and gestured toward a quieter corner of the counter. "Can I talk to you for a sec?" Arden's pulse kicked up, a curious mix of apprehension and hope. "Yeah, sure." They leaned close, voices dropping just above a whisper. Around them, the kitchen roared with the heat of the rush, but here for a moment there was a fragile bubble of calm. Seth's gaze darted away for a beat, darkness swirling in those blue depths. "It's kind of strange, I guess," he began, voice rougher somehow, softer too. "I've never talked about this here. At work, we all keep things pretty surface level. But I had a relationship once. With a guy." The words hit Arden like a tremor beneath his ribs. His breath caught, heart pounding, a quiet, frantic rhythm. Seth, the man he'd pegged so firmly as straight-so, wrapped in denial and careful pretense, had a past Arden had never imagined. The revelation shattered some of the neat assumptions Arden had held, cracking open a new space he hadn't dared to explore. Seth's expression was tight, wary, as if he'd just crossed a dangerous precipice. It was a long time ago. Before a lot of things, it didn't end well. He wasn't someone I was proud to be with. But yeah, it happened. And I guess I never thought I'd say that out loud again. Arden swallowed hard, struggling to find the words to build a bridge rather than push a wedge. "Thanks for telling me," he said quietly, words almost lost beneath the rush of the kitchen. "That takes courage." Seth's lips twitched into something nearly like a smile, a crack in the armor. "I'm not always great at courage, but that night with you, it made me think maybe it's time to stop hiding." A fragile hope unfurled in Arden's chest, warmth spreading beneath the cold tension that had gripped him all morning. The possibility of something real, something honest, was no longer just a shadow lurking at the edges of the night. It was here, breathing in the frantic pulse of midday, a fragile thread they could both reach for. Arden let his hand brush against Seth's briefly as he said, "You're not alone." This time, when Seth met his gaze, it was steady, no longer shadowed with doubt. "Maybe we really aren't," he whispered, and in that quiet corner of the kitchen, amid the clatter and the storm, two men began to draw closer, not just as co-workers, but as something more fragile. More true, the day surged onward, but for Arden, the world had tilted on its axis. The night's promise wasn't just a flicker of hope anymore. It was a door cracked open, inviting them both into uncertain but undeniable territory. The questions that had been unsaid stretched out like paths waiting to be travelled, and neither one of them could turn back now. The night had settled fully by the time they slipped quietly outside the venue, the last echoes of celebration and chatter fading behind them like a distant storm. The air was sharp and cold, biting at their cheeks and tugging at their jackets, but neither Arden nor Seth seemed to mind. The world felt calmer here, stripped of the chaos inside, the clanging dishes, clipped orders, and frantic footsteps replaced by an expansive quiet that stretched into the starlit sky. They stood side by side, beneath a faint glow from a distant street lamp, noses pinkening in the chill, the rough pavement beneath their boots creating a subtle rhythm in the silence. Arden exhaled slowly, the breath curling like mist between them. He pulled another cigarette from the nearly empty pack in his jacket pocket, a small invitation. Seth's eyes flicked to the slender stick before he nodded, because some rituals, even small acts, tethered them in this strange new chapter. Arden struck a match, the tiny flame blossoming and vanishing, as he lit both of their cigarettes. They inhaled, not just smoke, but something Syracuse hadn't allowed before. A shared moment, without the need to perform or defend. Time slowed until it seemed the only thing moving was the thin smoke spiraling up into the black. Seth's fingers twitched around his cigarette as he found himself staring at the soft glow rather than looking out at the street. "I've never done this before," he murmured, voice low and slightly uneven. "Not this," he gestured vaguely, the unspoken weight hanging between them heavier than the cold night air. It wasn't just about smoking outside after work. It was about admitting something deeply unfamiliar, something fragile. Arden turned toward him, the dim light catching the sharp angle of Seth's jawline and the small scar above his brow that always made him seem somehow more steadfast. "Never done what?" Arden asked, voice gentle, patient, wanting to hear every inch of what Seth was risking by speaking. Seth hesitated, his breath trembling against the cold. "Admitting feelings," he said finally, the words falling with a rawness that made Arden's heart nearly stop. "To anyone, not even myself, until tonight. I always thought I knew who I was. I thought," he shook his head, frustration lacing his tone, "I thought this stuff was clear-cut. Black and white." His blue eyes flicked toward Arden, shadows playing off the quiet vulnerability they revealed. "But it's not. And I'm scared because it means I can't pretend anymore." Short, sharp bursts of cold air pushed from Seth's lungs, mixing with the smoke and the quiet tension. Arden felt breathless, caught on the jagged edge of something vast and unknown. It wasn't just Seth's admission, it was the fragile armor, breaking down, the truth, exposed in raw, trembling honesty. It was terrifying, yes, but also beautiful, like the first tentative petals of a blossom reaching beyond a winter's grasp. Arden's gaze dropped to the cigarette burning low between his fingers, and then rose again to meet Seth's. "That takes more courage than you think," he said quietly. "More than anyone sees." There was no judgment here, no pressure, just an understanding forged by silent battles Arden himself had fought. "You're not alone in this, Seth, for a heartbeat." Seth's eyes widened, as if processing the depth of that simple truth. Then slowly the tension around his mouth softened, and he gave a small, almost shy smile that lit something warm in Arden's chest. "I guess not," Seth whispered, voice thick with emotion, and a delicate trace of hope that felt as fragile as the cigarette ash crumbling between them. The air between them seemed charged, heavy with promises and the unsaid. Neither of them moved for a long moment, standing close but respectful of the space that still carried unspoken questions and fears. The night felt like it was holding its breath alongside them. Finally, Seth cleared his throat and took a long drag of his cigarette, steadying his voice. "I never thought I'd say any of this out loud. I always believed I had to be one thing or another, but, Arden, with you for once, I don't want to be just one thing. I don't want to hide anymore." Arden's heart pounded at the raw sincerity. That Seth, who had worn so much certainty as armor, was willing to unravel even a little, was like a gift, a thread extended across the cold dark, waiting to be grasped. Without quite realizing, Arden's hand moved almost imperceptibly, fingers brushing against Seth's. The contact was electric, fleeting enough to be missed, yet powerful enough to set both of them alight beneath their skin. Seth's gaze locked on Arden's deep and searching, as if both exploring the possibility of trust. The cold night air wrapped around them, amplified the charge, but neither man recoiled. Instead, they stood together, bound by something newfound and unspoken. Their cigarettes burned lower, and Arden's thoughts swirled, wondering where this thread would lead, how tightly to pull, or whether to let it loosen. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with anticipation, promise, and a gentle vulnerability neither had dared to voice until now. When their cigarettes finally burned out, they flicked them to the ground and crushed the smouldering embers under heel. Sound sharp and grounded. Seth exhaled, shorter now, tension melting from his shoulders in small waves. "Let's go back inside," he suggested quietly. Arden nodded, but his heart raced as they passed the threshold, the warm air of the venue enveloping them once more. But something had changed now, something in the way they moved, breathed, and looked at each other. The room no longer felt like just a workplace or a battlefield of hidden truths. It was a space where something unexpected could quietly take root. They navigated a narrow hallway, lined with stacked chairs and folding tables, the remnants of the wedding reception cluttering the corners. The dry scent of leftover flower petals and faint traces of perfume hung in the air, mingling with the distant hum of cleaning crews. The silence between them stretched, neither ready to break the fragile bubble that had formed outside. Seth's hand brushed lightly against Arden's as they passed. Intentional this time fingertips, tracing the back of his wrist, sending a slow ripple through Arden's body. Arden froze, breath-catching, and his hazel eyes flicked up to meet Seth's. There was no awkward withdrawal, no distancing. Instead, Seth's gaze held steady, wide and open, the scar above his brow softening in the dim light. That accidental touch ignited something primordial in Arden, a clarity sharper than any fear. It was an unspoken permission to be seen, to be vulnerable, to be desired without apology. The air between them thickened with possibility. Seth's lips parted slightly, as if to say something, but no words came. Instead, his expression softened into something tender hopeful even, and Arden felt himself teetering on the edge of a choice he didn't want to be without. Minutes passed like hours as they stood there, connected by that single contact that spoke of trust more eloquently than any confession. For the first time, the distance carved by years of assumptions and silence dissolved between them, leaving only the raw, aching need to bridge the gap. "You don't have to say anything," Arden whispered, voice barely audible, but carrying all the weight of his heart. "Not yet. Just this, right now." Seth blinked, his blue eyes shimmering faintly in the low light. A slow, shy smile curved his lips, and he nodded once. His fingers lingered for a breath longer on Arden's wrist before slowly retreating, but the warmth that trail had left in its wake remained. An invisible tether. They resumed walking, side by side, but closer now, the accidental spark lingering like embers beneath their skin. Every glance, every brush of shoulder carried a newfound gravity. It was as if the entire world had compressed into the quiet moments between them, small gestures heavy with possibility, breaths shared in close proximity, a fragile dance of trust beginning to take form. Back in the main hall, the air smelled of waxed floors and faint traces of floral arrangements left behind. They moved around each other with careful ease, no awkwardness, just a quiet acknowledgement simmering beneath their casual movements. Arden caught himself watching Seth from the corner of his eye, the way his jaw tightened slightly when he concentrated, the almost imperceptible way his hand flexed whenever their fingers brushed accidentally again. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. Seth shifted a tray of glassware on a nearby table, his movements deliberate but slow, as if savouring each moment. Arden felt his own pulse in his throat, a fierce rhythm that echoed the unspoken desires swirling between them. "How do we do this?" Arden asked quietly, voice rough with emotion. "After tonight, after all that's been said, but not said." Seth met his gaze, and for a moment vulnerability flashed in his blue eyes like a fragile flame. "One step at a time," he said softly. "I don't know where it's going, but I want to find out." With you, Arden's breath hitched, a wave of relief and hope rushing over him. "Me too." As they stood there, surrounded by empty chairs and half-packed trays, the enormity of what lay ahead didn't feel so daunting, not tonight. Tonight, in the small hours of a quiet venue, two men who had once been strangers on opposite sides of a hidden line stood at the cusp of something real, fragile, and terrifyingly beautiful. And for the first time, they both believed the night had changed everything. The room had grown quiet, the last echoes of footsteps and laughter fading into the night, leaving only the soft hum of the city beyond the windows and the faint scent of lavender from the table centerpieces. Arden's heart thundered in his chest, each beat a reminder of the fragile thread stretched taut between what had been and what might be. He leaned against the edge of a work table, the smooth wood cool beneath his palms, trying to steady the storm of thoughts swimming through his mind. Fear settled over him, like a dense fog. Despite the hope simmering between them, a gnawing uncertainty crept in. What if this was just a moment of weakness? An aberration sparked by exhaustion, and the surreal closeness only a shared night of labor could bring. Could Seth really mean what he said, that he wanted to find out where this could go? Or was Arden fooling himself, grasping at something that might vanish with the morning light? He swallowed hard, his gaze tracing the faint scars on his own hands, reminders of years spent hiding small parts of himself, bruised and guarded like those calluses. This wasn't just about a job or a late shift anymore. It was about opening his whole self to the possibility of rejection, to the terrifying vulnerability that came with naming what had long lived in shadows beneath the surface. Seth appeared beside him without a sound, the faint scrape of his shoes against the concrete breaking the silence. Arden's breath hitched, and for a moment he almost pulled away, panic fluttering like a trapped bird in his chest. But Seth didn't recoil. Instead, he reached out, tentative and slow, resting a hand lightly on Arden's forearm. Warmth radiated from his touch, grounding Arden where the doubts threatened to pull him under. "Can I be honest?" Seth's voice was low, rough around the edges, as if saying the words cost him more than just courage. "Because I don't know how to do this, any of this without being honest about who I've been." Arden's pulse quickened, the desperation of Seth's confession stirring something deep inside him. "I'm listening." Seth exhaled, a breath that seemed to carry the weight of years. "I always thought I was straight. Hell, I was sure. I don't know what happens now, or if there's even a way forward. But if I'm honest with you and with myself, I'm scared that I've been lying to the people I care about, scared that I might lose them. And scared that maybe what I'm feeling isn't just a passing thing." There was a tremor in his blue eyes, a vulnerability so raw, It fractured Arden's defenses. "Felt like I was supposed to have it all figured out by now," Seth admitted, voice faltering. "But I don't. Not really." He looked away, then back, searching Arden's face for reasons to hope. Arden's throat tightened, and the fear inside him softened, replaced by an aching tenderness. "You're not alone," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I've been scared, too. Scared of what this means. Scared of saying the wrong thing, or showing too much." His own hands curled into fists, nails digging into his palms. "But sitting here with you, hearing you say that, it helps. Even if it's messy and uncertain, it's real." Seth's hand tightened on Arden's forearm, a silent promise anchored in touch. Real, better than perfect. The tension between them softened, a fragile truce woven out of shared admissions and the quiet bravery that comes with facing yourself in the light. For now, they let the silence settle, not empty, but full of possibility. Later, amid the grandeur of the wedding, Arden stood at the edge of the bustling reception hall, the hum of conversation and clinking glasses, stark contrast to the quiet night they'd shared. Lights twinkled overhead like captive stars, and the scent of roses mingled with the faint tang of champagne. Arranged as if for a dream, the scene pulsed with laughter and music, but Arden's attention remained tethered to the man across the room. Seth caught his eye in a moment that felt suspended between heartbeats. Time slowed, the world narrowing to the space between their glances. A shared understanding, a flicker of something unspoken that neither tried to hide. Seth's lips quirked into a small, fleeting smile, and Arden felt an electric warmth rise through his chest, a smile of his own blooming in response, soft and genuine. The pretense of the crowd, a sea of smiling faces and whispered congratulations, pulled at them, but the truth in their eyes was unmistakable. They belonged in this shared, secret space, carved out just for them, even if only for a breath. As the music swelled into a swirling waltz, Seth slipped away under the guise of needing a fresh breath of air, and Arden followed, heart pounding in his ears. They drifted towards the empty catering truck, parked just beyond the garden's edge, where the sounds of the party faded into a gentle quiet. The night air was cool, the crisp clarity of stars overhead calling forth unguarded truths. Seth leaned against the truck's cold metal side, his cheeks flushed with a mix of exertion, nerves, and something Arden couldn't name but wanted to explore. For a moment their shoulders brushed tentative, electric contact, and Arden swallowed the sudden surge of courage rising within him. "I don't think I'm straight anymore," Seth admitted in a voice barely above a whisper, eyes fixed on a point somewhere far beyond the city lights. "Not like I thought I was." Arden's breath caught, the words falling between them like fragile glass, shining in their honesty and possibility. Relief radiated through him in a wave so deep it almost stunned, hope unfurling, like a flower finally turning toward the sun. "Thank God," Arden said, voice thick with feeling he'd barely dared to acknowledge, "because I keep wondering if I'm the only one feeling this way, if it's all just in my head." A raw vulnerability shining in the blue depths. "You're not alone," he said simply. "I want to know what this could be with you." The words hung in the night air, hopeful but tentative. Arden stepped closer, heart thrumming so loud it drowned out the distant music. The space between them shrank until it was filled with nothing but shared breath and the electric charge of possibility. His hand lifted, trembling, almost imperceptibly, before brushing back Seth's hair, the sandy strands soft against his fingers. Seth's eyes fluttered, closed in a small, unspoken surrender. Arden's lips hesitated, mere inches from Seth's, the weight of everything unsaid pressing against his skin. And then, finally, the moment broke. Their lips met with tentative softness, an exploration, a slipping into warmth after years of frozen doubt. The kiss was uncertain at first, fragile and searching, like the smallest flame flickering against a chill wind. But it deepened quickly, as if both men found in each other a long-awaited refuge, the kind of safety that needed no words, only the steady, reassuring beat of two hearts daring to beat as one. Arden's hands found Seth's shoulders, his touch gentle and sure, anchoring them in a reality that was at once terrifying and beautiful. Seth's fingers curled into the fabric at Arden's waist, pulling him closer, and the breath they shared mingled with the night air, carrying promises neither dared speak aloud, yet. When they finally parted, breaths mingled and hearts racing, their eyes locked with an understanding that this was just the beginning, a fragile, uncertain start, but a start nonetheless. "Whatever comes," Arden whispered, voice husky, "we face it together." Seth nodded, smile breaking through the lingering doubt, like dawn's first light. Together. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Morning came soft and hesitantly, the pale sunlight casting a gentle glow through Arden's window. He lay still for a long moment, the memory of last night lingering in the folds of his mind, so vivid he could almost feel the ghost of Seth's touch on his skin. His phone buzzed quietly on the nightstand, a subtle reminder breaking the quiet peace. Arden reached for it without thinking, heart skipping, as the screen lit up with a message from Seth. "Can we talk? I want to try this with you." Those words settled over him like a warm embrace, filling the sleeping spaces with quiet hope. Arden's lips curved into a smile, soft and sure, eyes fluttering closed for a moment, as gratitude and possibility bloomed inside him. He was ready to face whatever came with honesty, with courage, and with a new kind of love he'd never dared imagine before, because last night had changed everything. And this morning, Arden welcomed the beginning of their story, fragile, uncertain, but undeniably real.